Hi ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I really want to move on to some other concerning cases and some unsolved cases. Also maybe get updates on cases we have spoken about before. But although it was never my intention to go after bigger mainstream cases, there are two cases pushing my blood pressure to levels where it should not go. And those are, of course, the Bryan Kohberger and Idaho 4 case and the missing Sebastian Rogers case. So I am going to make one more video each before I move on to other cases, crimes and mysteries. That is, of course, if nothing major happens in these two cases during, while, or even before I go on to other cases. Today, I'm sharing my latest thoughts and feelings on Bryan Kohberger, and if I become rather loud or sound frustrated, you will soon learn why. You see, when I talk about the case, friends and family often shake their heads and ask, what is wrong with me? How can I say Bryan is innocent, or that I'm leaning more towards him being innocent, when at the same time I say I am a good 70 to 90% convinced that Richard Allen is guilty, when the rest of the world seem to have it the other way around. Well, Richard Allen admitted to being an alcoholic, having a sex addiction, and being in the area at the time of the murders. All we have on Kohberger is a minute speck of touch DNA, which I would dare anyone to prove to the world exactly how it got there. Look, if there were, let's say, fingerprints or DNA with a touch DNA or primary DNA found on more than one item or in more than one place in that house, and it would prove to have been Bryan Kohberger's, then I would say, get the firing squad ready. But you cannot. No intelligent, normal human being can send someone to death based only on one minute speck of touch DNA. You cannot do it. Some people are baying to the moon. Oh, but he stalked the girls. He was near the home 12 times. Prove it. Back up that claim. No, you can't, because the proof does not exist. Here is an example for you. When I switch on my computer, it picks up a variety of other Wi-Fi connections. Now, I do not necessarily know every one of my neighbors personally, but I know their names enough to recognize it. But other than my neighbors, I also pick up the nursery school down the road and another service provider whose office is quite a distance from us, and then a number of other people and names I do not recognize. Now, if something should happen to anyone in any of those homes or places, will that now mean that I did it? I mean, don't be ridiculous. As we drive to school or wherever else, I'm sure I touch on a number of Wi-Fi connections, sometimes maybe twice per day, and then I'm told that the story that Bryan's phone touched the Kings Road Wi-Fi is even a lie, that it is actually just rubbish and BS. So we will have to wait and see whether that will even come up at trial. I doubt it will. Personally, I think even if true, it still means nothing. How many times did Maddie's boyfriend's phone touch the internet? Or Jack DeCoeur's, or any other of hundreds of people in the Moscow, Idaho district? How many actually even connected with the service? Many, I guess, because the girls had lots of friends. It was a party house. So indeed, it means absolutely nothing, even if it is true that his phone touched the Wi-Fi. Now, we also learned that Bryan could account for every time he was in or near Moscow, and usually it was for shopping, or he filled up on gas or something like that. Oh my word. Now people are saying that is suspicious, because why doesn't he shop closer to home? Oh my goodness, people, learn to use Google before you argue a point. Pullman, Washington is only 14 kilometers, or then 9 miles, or 14 minutes from Moscow, Idaho. You know, sometimes when we need computer stuff, or we need computers repaired, or repairs done to any electronics, we drive 64 kilometers or 1 hour to a town called George, which is nearly 40 miles away. Here is another example. We are doing repairs to our home, rather extensive repairs, because I bought an old rundown wreck and I'm trying to turn it into a livable, creative, arty place. So, there are 2 hardware stores almost on my doorstep. The one is 2 blocks away in one direction, and the other one's about 2 blocks away in the other direction. But I only go to them if I need something cheap or small. When I need something bigger, more expensive, then I go to another hardware store, because I have a loyalty card for that place, and not only get points, which I can exchange for money on purchases, but I also get discounts and sometimes even freebies. For me, having to do extensive work on this house on my income alone, these discounts, etc., are worth its price in gold. So I drive those extra kilometers because the financial benefit outweighs the petrol. They also stock everything I need. I know my way around the store, and the service is good. So why would I go elsewhere, even if it is closer? We humans have preferences, ideas, and feelings which may even sometimes sound silly to others. However, does it mean we are capable of hurting, harming, or killing others? Heck no. Goodness, I drive about 7 kilometers to our Pick and Pay, which is like your Costco or Walmart. Why would Bryan Kohberger not drive 14 kilometers if he feels that his vegetarian staples and stock are, say, better at a store in Moscow? Let's quickly touch on the touch DNA found again. Law enforcement has, as yet, not provided the chain of command for that DNA from the moment the sheath was found to the moment it landed at the laboratory. Now, what does that mean? That means who found it and when. What did he do with the sheath? Did he bag it? Was he wearing gloves? When he did, was it a new pair of gloves out of a sealed packet? Okay, and then what? Who did he hand this evidence to? Was it correctly taken up into evidence and tagged? Who took it to the laboratory for testing, and who handled it once it was at the laboratory? Why can't law enforcement give the defense that kind of information? Remember, that was, criminology, and that kind of thing was also Bryan Kohberger's job. So if these guys maybe picked up a pair of used gloves, who says Bryan Kohberger did not use it at the university or wherever before it got to them? I mean, I know it sounds silly, I know it's really a stretch, but these things are important, okay? We need to know who handled the sheath, when did they handle it, what did they do with it, did they wear brand new gloves, did they take it out of a plastic bag before they put it on, a sealed bag. I mean, these are important factors because it is touch DNA, secondary DNA. So, if Bryan Kohberger had been in Moscow a couple of times, but not necessarily even near 112 King's Road, then why the hell would he pick that house? Why would he attack the people in that particular house? I'm sure there are other apartments, other student lodgings, also with girls and women living there. Why that particular one? There was a story that Bryan Kohberger visited the restaurant where Zana and Maddie worked, but that was disputed by the owner. He says he has never seen Bryan Kohberger before or remember hearing his name. So there goes that theory. Then people came and said, oh, but there is Richard Speck, who walked into a townhouse housing 9 student nurses and killed 8 of them. He also raped 1. Yes, Speck may not have known any of these schools as far as we know, but, we're talking many years ago, smaller area, not necessarily student dwellings, but it was likely well known that a group of young nurses, trainee nurses, lived there. Speck also had numerous previous convictions for other crimes. People also liken Bryan Kohberger to Ted Bundy, who killed 2 college students. But it is rather fanciful thinking, in my opinion, because the motive for Bundy also appears to have been sexual, whereas there's no sign of sexual interference or even an attempt at it in the Kohberger Idaho 4 case. So what would Bryan Kohberger's motive have been had it been him? How did he even know who was in the house at the time? Maddie could have had her boyfriend there, so could Kaylee, and so indeed did Zana. Then the Hyundai Elantra. Law enforcement put out that they were looking for a 2011-2013 Hyundai Elantra, which was seen near the home on the night of the murders as the, and I quote, occupants with an S, more than one, may have critical information. Well, Bryan Kohberger drove a 2015 Elantra and he was alone. Now, I do not get the feeling that Bryan Kohberger is or could be a killer. I mean, let's be honest here. He may be tall and a runner, but he is certainly not some tough guy. He looks like the more studious type of loner, slightly weird guy, and who can maybe tell you more about the stars than he can about pop music. Is he a bit of a weirdo? Yes, I think he is, but not in a gross way. But looks and feelings are indeed not evidence. So, although I make mention of my visual observation, it is 100% the lack of evidence against Bryan Kohberger which has me leaning towards innocent. There's also talk of other prints in the house. Why did law enforcement or FBI never test those prints. By not doing it, it is causing us to think someone is protecting someone else. But who? The thing is also that there is a difference between primary and secondary DNA. Remember, I explained it before. Primary could be spittle, blood, it could also be semen, etc. But secondary DNA could be DNA carried over from one person to another. Thus, if there was indeed a bloody handprint and the DNA of 3 other males, then surely the jury would want to know who they are before sending Bryan Kohberger to death. Another story has recently broken out, namely that Zana Knodel was the first to be killed and not Kaylee and Maddie. If that is true, then it changes the entire dynamic and timeline of the murders. So guys, in my opinion, and even though I may think Bryan Kohberger is innocent, I'm also saying that he could very well be guilty. But as horrible as it may sound, even though he may be guilty, unless or until law enforcement can answer the questions we've just posed in this video and prove each and every one, should Bryan Kohberger be sitting in a jail cell. At this point, with the evidence available to us, Bryan Kohberger should walk, and likely, or rather hopefully at this point, will. Okay, in my opinion, there is 10 times less circumstantial evidence in this case than there is in the Suzanne Morphew case. So her husband could not be found guilty because the circumstantial evidence was not enough. So how can you find Bryan Kohberger guilty? How can you send him to death on less circumstantial evidence than that? I'm just asking. Okay, my dear friends, that's it from me for today. I will be back very soon with a video on Sebastian Rogers, in which I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to ask as many questions as I could possibly come up with and mention as many things as I possibly can going through my head. So until then, please take good care of yourselves. Bye.